Hello. Before I start this podcast, I want to preface it because as I was processing all the things that were said in this podcast, I feel like I left something out that is wildly important for you to consider while listening to this very, very important topic and very important podcast. I stress the importance of boundaries and natural consequences with our children as it relates to behaviors in the home. However, just because we need to find boundaries and put those in place does not mean they need to be in a mean, negative, heavy way. There are ways to put boundaries in place and place natural consequences without being so angry at our children and resentful at our children because of those behaviors that causes a disconnect within your home. And I feel like it was really important to just touch on that for a second of being angry and resentful towards our children can happen, especially when there's this type of behavior in the home, but not projecting that onto them is so crucial. So how do we do that? Be sarcastic. Like, oh man, geez, you must have really, really wanted that natural consequence. Wow. Like, I want you to use sarcasm rather than anger. And I can go into that into another podcast, but it's really important that I just throw that out there to make sure that you know it doesn't have to be in a mean, screaming match way, to hold boundaries and make sure that there's no violence in the home. So with that, enjoy the podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Thrive Like a Parent podcast. Today, I am talking about another one of your questions that you asked me in terms of, I said, what do you want to talk about? And as soon as I got this message or question, I immediately took to stories and started answering the question that I asked you for questions for the podcast, not for just a Q&A, because this is another one of those that I get really fired up about, really, really fired up. And again, the gloves have come off and I'm gonna be honest with you. So the question says, my ADHD kid is getting violent and having a ton of meltdowns. How do I help him? So today we're going to talk about violence within our kids. And this doesn't have to be like severe violence. It can just be minor violence. Like, we're going to tap into all of that and touch into all of that. So the first thing that if I was talking to that person, that parent, I would have said, how old's your child? So I want to know if this child is 2 and pounding on their parent with little, munchkin arms, or I want to know if this kid is 7 and throwing shit around the house. Either way, I believe that with the amount of information out there, the conscious parenting, the gentle parenting, with so much information out there now, I believe that somehow it has gotten lost in translation that boundaries are actually okay while parenting children. And what is that translating into? Violence in the home. Because I want you to think of it as, would you allow a friend to come into your home and be violent? Whether it's throwing a pillow or breaking a glass or kicking the TV or slamming the door shut, like small end, but like think of all the different, would you allow a friend to do that? You'd be like, what the fuck is up your ass? Like, okay, you can go home now. Like, don't think I'm going to have that friend over again in my space because they're not respecting my space, right? Like, that's like a no-brainer. Let's say you went on a date with someone who did that. You'd be like, get the fuck out. You'd be like, no, thank you. But somehow, if it's our children, because we love them, it's acceptable. And they're just going through a hard time and they are completely dysregulated and melting down. And we just need to let them, that's just, it's okay. Like, they're moving through feelings. Bullshit. I am so sorry. You could probably turn the podcast off right now. I really hope you don't. But I'm being completely blunt about this because, again, this is another one of these topics that I have skirted around for a really long time. If you read the definition of gentle parenting, if you read the definition of conscious parenting, it doesn't mean ignore when they slam the door in your face because they're just emotional. And it's their right to do that and they're expressing themselves. No. You are paying the bills. You are keeping the lights on. You are keeping the house clean. Hopefully, your kids are helping you keep the house clean with chores. Chores structure, all that is very healthy. But you get to decide what type of environment you're living in. You get to decide. And sometimes I hear things from clients, or I hear things from potential clients, or you DM me things. And I think we sometimes feel helpless as parents. And I'm not shaming you. I'm not guilting you. I'm not looking down on you. But what I am saying is you can do it. And I know you can do it. Like, I know you can do it. I did it, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to get my kids to where they are. Being a solo parent, yes, I have Carter, but he doesn't live here. And raising them and raising their standards every year as they get older of what to expect, especially when you're going through grief and you're fucking exhausted and you have no capacity, especially when you're doing a full-time job and you're burnt out at the end of the day and you have no help from your support or your spouse or your co-parent or whatever. Like, we have no time and energy for all this shit. We don't. But what ends up happening is your children are so smart that they know this, and your children are so calculating that they will be able to push until you break. So they know it's gotten to the point, for instance, in that household, it's gotten to the point where they know that if they break shit, you're gonna be like, oh gosh, I'm gonna back away. Like, I don't want them breaking stuff. Like, now they're getting violent. Oh, they hit their younger kid, like brother. Like, oh, but it was just, they're melting down. Like, no. And if you hear my tone, I'm like, no. And the reason I'm being so strong with this is because if we allow it, it's letting our children know that it is okay, and they will continue it. The same way I discussed with you how when I work with a client, we're rewiring and building new patterns in the brain and de-shaming a lot of the old patterns that we had. It is the same thing. If you allow your child to have that destructive behavior, and not hold the boundary with no, that's unacceptable, that's not what we do, then they will continue that behavior. And you're thinking, okay, well, of course I don't want them to do that in my home, but how do I get them to stop? How do I get them to stop? Well, conscious parenting and gentle parenting may not say it's okay to have natural consequences. I believe that's bullshit. The reason I believe that's bullshit is because that is how the brain learns. If you don't turn your assignment in on time, do you think that your boss is going to be like, oh, sure, no big deal. Like, you can get it to me next week. I mean, we needed it for the editor yesterday, but like, no big deal. We'll just have a white blank page in the magazine. Like, no big deal. They'd be like, get out. That's a natural consequence. If you don't pay your bills, you're going to have, I don't know, debt. And then you're going to have to figure all that out. If you don't pay your bills, your lights aren't going to come on, right? There's a natural consequence to everything. But if your kid whacks their brother upside the head and you're like, oh, they were dysregulated, or they were feeling big feelings. Oh, what? Like what? That child is going to think, oh, yep, that's totally okay because, I didn't get in trouble. So I didn't have a natural consequence. So like, it's fine. There has been a rule in my house from day one. I do not tolerate violence. Like, I don't tolerate it. I don't want it. I don't want to see it. Like, that's a no. That's an automatic no. Like, you shouldn't be putting your hands on each other. You shouldn't be hurting each other. Like, that's a no. And that's because I'm telling you, if one of my kids put their hands on me, that would be like no. And my children need to learn that. They need to learn that it's not okay to resort to violence. It's not okay to resort to hurting someone else. It's not okay to resort to damaging their home. They should respect their home. Whatever this violent, right? I'm using the word violent because that was the question, but it is a harsher word rather than like acting out or misbehaving, or like all of this is combined. If you don't want your kiddo to run around the table at dinner when you take them out, or if you don't want your kid whining because you need to go grab something at the grocery store and they're like, I don't want to go. I want to stay home and watch TV. Like, that's exhausting. It's exhausting to hear it. It's frustrating because you're the one that's going to get, the hot dog or the milk or the whatever it is for probably your kids, but they don't want to go. So it's like, then you got to listen to that on top of you doing something else for your kids. All of this can be shifted if you allow it. to be shifted. Now, I've done a podcast on like natural consequences and what does that look like. I want you to think of what your child would be really sad to have to do, or sad if they lost something, or something that they're working towards. Maybe they do the dishes, maybe they do the laundry, maybe they write lines because their handwriting is not so great anyway. So it's two birds, one stone. They're writing lines. I will not hit my brother, or I won't slam doors. Maybe they're writing it 25 times, but they need great spacing and they need it to be legible, and they're going to be pissed. Like, they're going to be pissed at you, and they may even make your life harder while you're trying to give them the natural consequence, because they're seeing how far they can go and see if you'll give up, because it's easier for them to tantrum and melt down than write the lines. And if that's the case, then you have found a good natural consequence. You can have them scoop poop. You can have them mow the lawn. You can have them do heavy lifting, bring in the groceries. You can think of things that will help them in their everyday life, taking out the trash, right? For an entire week, like teach them skills. And maybe chores. And you're like, yeah, they already have chores. Well, then again, handwriting. You can have them do, even lunges like across the backyard, because that helps with strength and mobility for, 5 minutes. And they're not going to like that. They're going to be like, I'm burning. Ooh, I know. And again, I'm literally throwing random things out there. You decide what's best. Maybe they have to clean their room. Maybe they have to clean your room. Maybe they have to do your laundry. Maybe they have to write you an apology. Who knows? Maybe they have to pay for what they broke. Maybe they have to write apology notes to who they hurt. But it is okay for them to feel the burn. And it is okay if they buck back. Now, if they buck back, and we can handle them like pushing back for 10 minutes. But if they're bucking back for an hour, now they have completely occupied your time, and that has been your whole afternoon is dealing with that. So now they owe you an hour. They could just sit there quietly after school one day of like, maybe you cut it into 2 30-minute sessions of like, you're going to, yeah. And like, you don't have to tell them like, hey, when you get home, you're going to do 30 minutes of like quiet time. You just be like, hey, I need you to come sit for a little. Why? Well, why do you think? I don't know. Nope. You're old enough. You can tell me. Why do you think you're going to sit here for a little? Right? We want to show our children that our time is valuable as well. And I hope that you're listening to this feeling wildly uncomfortable. If you're feeling wildly uncomfortable, it's totally okay. But what that means is that you're not necessarily in the driver's seat right now as a parent. And your child might be the one that's in the driver's seat. And when your child is the one in the driver's seat, your household is not going to run well. You are going to be exhausted. You are going to overfunction. This is like, go get them, slugger. This is your like huddle, in the locker room before the football team comes out. Like, this is your pep talk. This is your like, you got this. You're not going to break them. You're not going to damage them. They're not going to hate you if you hold boundaries. If you give them natural consequences, what they are going to do is they're actually going to build a stronger relationship, trusting dynamic with you, a greater bond of respect with you. And I guarantee you they will be happier humans, because right now they're probably acting out because they crave and actually need more structure. And if you keep that structure in your home, there is no room for them to be violent. There's no room, because you've made a very structured life and they know what's expected of them, and we're going to continue down that path. What I'm seeing is a lot of hands off parenting at the moment, and I'm not pointing you out. I'm not judging. I'm not like, I always preface things like I'm saying what I need to say and I'm being blunt, but there's a reason behind why we are at where we're at. The world functions so fast and we are expected to do so much more. The cost of living is fucking crazy. None of us live close to family anymore to get the help we need from our grandparents with kids, or like, there's just so many reasons why we're at where we're at. And, I go into that all the time, but because we're so exhausted, dysregulated, shutting down, snapping at our kids, burnt out, just needing a moment, we're like, here's an iPad. Here's the TV. Here, I just need one meal. I get it. Like, I fully get it. Those iPads were my best friends when I was going through the thick of it right after Jonathan passed, because I didn't have any capacity. And I gave myself an okay pass if they needed every now and then an iPad day for me. So trust me when I say I am not judging you. But the problem is that, I was actually talking to a camp yesterday that I was considering sending my kids to this summer. And she said, the woman that I spoke to said, they work really, really hard on like immersing the kids. And it's like, you think of like a campfire and kumbaya. She was like, it used to be like that, but it's extremely difficult to pull children out of the thick of what they're staring at every single day in real life. It's really hard to pull the kids out of that. And that literally broke my heart. Now, although I used iPads when necessary for me, I pulled them as soon as I could. And that was when I was healthy enough. I would say I maybe did it for a few months and then I was like, boop, here we go. My thing is my kids don't get their iPads unless they're on a plane. Like that is it. And I don't know any other way because my kids have done it for so long that they're never asking me for their iPads. They're never like, oh, well, when they're sick too, because I quarantine them. And I quarantine them in the room because I don't want to get sick. Because if mom goes down, it's not good. We got to call in reinforcements and it's just not great. So I let them have it then because they're stuck in their room. I'm not like, here, come lay on the couch and let me let you schnot and schnarf and all the things all over the furniture. Like, pass. So they get it then as well. But my kids don't have Roblox. Maybe they do, but they'd never use it because when we're on an airplane, they don't get internet. So whatever. My kids have a gaming system too that Jonathan bought them. They don't really even use that. I mean, they watch TV, but I think the less you give it, the less they crave it. And so I think that we're so used to utilizing this as a tool for peace and quiet for us. And I did use it for that. So I get it. I fully, fully, fully get it. And I will be lying to you if I didn't say that getting my kids to where they are today has been a journey and effort. Like it is absolute effort. And there has been so many moments of turmoil for me. And you know what? This is probably why I'm so passionate about this and so strong headed and really blunt within this podcast. And I'm just kind of having an aha moment as I really think that I'm able to rip off the Band-Aid and be so blunt and say it like it is because I needed to level up within my own parenting in certain ways. And I did it very slowly over the course of a really long time, but there was so much fear that I was going to the same thing. They were going to hate me, or I was going to make things worse, or I was going to literally I was going to damage their brain. And, having children who have come from a parent who has taken their own life, my children have a 50% higher chance of doing the same thing. And so much comes up for me when I think about pushing them to the next level or holding boundaries with them or having to be that strong, I guess you could say, I don't know, I'm going to say boundary enforcer, not rule enforcer, but I had to make peace with the fact that was not going to damage my kids. And it was scary. It was so scary. But little by little, I'm telling you, I literally mourned the loss of the old parent that I was, because I got to be more the nurturer. And now I had to learn how to be more of the dominant, if you will. I had to learn how to be the boundary setter and to earn respect from my children when I don't have, Carter in the home every day being like, hey, what did you just say to your mom? We're not going to speak to her like that. I had to teach that to my kids on my own. And I'm saying all this because it's not a fun thing to do. It's not fun to be like, excuse me. It's not a fun thing to have to be that sharp, be that bold with my kids, especially when all I want to do is love them and nurture them. But now that I've done it and I see how they're thriving and I see how I basically faced my biggest fears, they're doing so well. They are doing so incredibly well. And that is because I have put all these things in place within my own home over the course of many years. And it was over the course of many years because I had to move through my own fears. I had to move through my own emotions surrounding it of, is this going to mess them up? Like, am I going to, that's what for me, it always goes back to is like, is this going to be healthy for their brain? And not only that, but I really had to move through the discomfort of watching my children be upset when I did enforce a boundary. And then, like I was saying, like 10 minutes, we got this. But like an hour, like if they're bucking back and doing all the things, it's like, it's gut wrenching and it's exhausting and it's miserable to deal with. And it's just, it's awful. Like it's so awful. And I had to be able to say, no, like, I know that I'm right. I know that I'm right. And I know that I can do this. And I know that I need to stay in the driver's seat. And again, this took over the course of many years, right? For me to learn how to own my own boundaries and to own my driver's seat space of this family. And there's so much respect for each other. There's so much love for each other. And I've literally watched this with other clients. I have one client in particular who I mean, she's a phenomenal human, and she was like all in. She was like all in on gentle and conscious parenting and believing that, we should allow them to have their emotions and feelings. And this sweet little boy was so effing brilliant that he had to take it to new heights and new, like he had to keep upping the ante to the point where he was like taking frames off the wall and breaking it, and the glass was shattering on the floor. So then when mom would walk in, she'd step on the glass. Like, he was a brilliant kid to get away and get what he wanted. And it wasn't, holy shit, that kid's got problems, like he needs to, be admitted. It's, holy shit, that kid is brilliant. Because once she started setting boundaries and saying, no, it is not okay. It is not okay to have a meltdown while hitting me. It is not okay. Like, it's not okay. He didn't like it. Her son did not like it because he's like, huh? It was like a sheriff is in town. And she herself had to go through the process of like, wait, you need to tell me this again. I don't know if I fully understand that or trust that. Like, this is really scary to me. And I was like, you're right. Like, I'm glad you're coming and challenging me on this. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about why you feel that this XYZ. And we would always talk through it. And she'd be like, okay, okay. And I'll be damn, things got better. Things got better while we worked together. And he is in a much different place. And she is in a much different place of like, look, these are my boundaries. Like, you can do your thing, but like, I got boundaries too. And we got to live in the same space together, and we need to respect one another. And I could not have been more proud of watching her journey and seeing how her son really stepped up and really listened and really, I mean, they really bonded and had so much healthier of a dynamic. It was just beautiful to watch. And that was a few years ago. And if you're listening to this and you know who you are, I love you very much. And I'm extremely proud of your journey and efforts. But I say all of this with like so much love and compassion, because not only do I know what it's like to go through the trenches of, leveling up my kids, but I also have watched my clients go through it too. And I know the amount of effort, exhaustion, and expenditure of energy this is for you when you have a child who is so fucking brilliant that they will literally stand on the roof and be like, I'm not going to school. And I'm not kidding you. This was like one of our clients. She was like, what do I do now? He's on the roof. Like, I got, no joke. I wouldn't call that violence, but I would call that avoidance of following directions, right? If you don't want your kiddos climbing on the roofs, it is okay to be like, that's unacceptable. That's not what we're going to do. It is okay to hold boundaries with your kids. It is okay to expect of them certain things. And you get to decide what is okay and what is not. I got to decide what my family life looks like, what my household looks like. You get to decide as well. So if you're okay with your kiddo slamming the door or telling you I hate you or telling you to shut up, like, you get to decide. You get to decide. But if your child does something violent and you're like, oh, nope, that didn't feel good. Or like, nope, I really don't want them doing that. Or like, oh God, if there's some twinge inside of you, or like, like, no, thank you. Listen to it. Listen to it. And give yourself grace on the days that you can't show up. Like, really give yourself grace. But what kids require is consistency, boundaries, and consistency. And once you set a boundary, don't go back on it, because then they will know that you will go back on it. And so then they will up the ante. If your child, I'm going to say one last thing. If your child is having a meltdown, right? We've gone over tantrums versus meltdown. If your child is having a meltdown and they're young and they are kicking, thrashing, throwing, violence, throwing, like all the different things, I want you to put them in a safe space, and I want you to shut the door, and I want you to sit outside of the door and just say, I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. Your child does not need to be throwing things in the middle of the house. We're going to keep that contained. And if they are melting down, that does mean that they're dysregulated. But that recommendation for you, 2, 3, 4, 5, by 6 years old, we want to diminish those tantrums and meltdowns. We want to have them be able to start pulling it together and be able to come back online faster. So we don't want to give in to the meltdowns too much. We want to let them have their meltdown and just be like, okay, when you're ready, we're going to go. So keep pushing your kids to learn more and grow more and take on more, right? Like I was talking earlier about this style of parenting that's like hands-off parenting. It's, you can see it. Like, you can see it in the kids that have that. You absolutely can see that. I can see that in some of my kids' friends. I can see that in some of Carter's daughter Lila's friends, and they are 12. I can see that with, even when I'm on vacation and I'm at a restaurant, I can see it. And I think we are all so scared of fucking up our kids because we ourselves might feel like our parents fucked us up. So we want to do something differently. But it's okay to do it differently and still have boundaries. It's okay to do it differently and still request no violence in the home. It's okay to do it differently and still, have conversations about feelings and emotions. There is a place, and I know I've said this before, but there is a place for sensory and emotional regulation and boundaries. 1000%. 1000%. So if this hits you hard, if this is scary to you, you are not alone. And that's why I told you my personal story on it is I had to be able to accept, just because I have a fear of what me holding boundaries or setting natural consequences, just because I have a fear of potentially what that'll look like or how that'll affect my kids for the future, doesn't mean I shouldn't parent them right now. And so I parent the child in front of me. And I want you to do the same. Parent the child in front of you, not the child you fear they will become. I'm so afraid that if I do this, no, you see something and you parent the child in front of you, and we build trust, respect, love, and connection. And from someone who's had to do this, from someone who has had to mourn the loss of the gentle parent and the kind parent and the parent who was the nurturer of the two, like, I didn't lose my connection with the boys. They don't hate me. I didn't mess them up. Quite the opposite. I have leveled them up to be mature 7 and 10-year-olds who I am constantly proud of. When people tell me that their manners are so nice and that they're so respectful, or that they were so kind to friends, or whatever they tell me. And I'm not boasting about my kids. It's not like I get this all day long and they're just perfect angels here. Like, trust me, they're not. And I'm not the perfect parent. But what I'm saying is that I feel good in the direction that I have taken my parenting for the age that they are at. And I am proud that I was able to move through all my funk in order to get to where I need to be for them. And they need me. They need that. And your children need it too. Because if there's violence in the home, big or small, it is okay to stop it. It is okay to say no. It is okay to place every boundary and every natural consequence that you have to place in order for it to stop as young as you can, and hold that boundary strong. Because if you think of, I have boys, so that's where my brain goes. But if you think of a little, 7-year-old who's throwing shit at the TV or slamming doors, what is that 7-year-old going to do when they're 12? And so I want you to parent the child in front of you of, is this okay or is this not okay? And none of us know what the fuck we're doing. This is the first time we're doing it. Hello. So if your kids are a little bit younger, take the advice from me, put the boundaries in now. I know it's exhausting, but our kids need us. Like, they need us so desperately bad right now. And I just feel like we are passively parenting because we're so exhausted, and I get it, but they need us. They need us to build in structure. They need us to give them chores. They need us to hold boundaries, and they need us to teach them right from wrong. We are their teacher, and it is okay to teach. So go get them, Slugger. You got this. XOXO, Dr. B.